Hi, I'm Donna Fields, and thank you so much for joining me here today. We have a lot of people signed up, so I may be admitting people as we progress, but there are also a lot of people who have signed up who can't connect at this time, and I'll be sending all of you a recording of the session later. You also see that there's a link for a Google Drive folder, so after the session, I'll send that to you as well, so you have access to the materials that we're going to share this afternoon. If there's something we go over that you can't find in the Google Drive folder, please let me know. And if it's in my power, I will send it to you. As you see, this is the first of a 5-part webinar series on the LOMLOE, and specifically how the new laws actually help us to create more inclusive classes. So that's quite a bonus, isn't it? Let's begin, because I have a lot of information for you, and especially want to share some ways for you to make some really simple changes in your classes, in your lessons that are the beginnings of implementing the laws proposed by the LOMLOE. Okay? Those of you who have participated in some of my workshops before know that objectives and sharing objectives are really important to me and need to be for you as well. Sharing objectives with our students and giving them the opportunity to make suggestions and even add their own objectives is a way of sending a powerful message to them, that we consider them co-creators in their own learning, that we value their participation, that we believe they have the right and the responsibility in designing their own learning environment. So I ask all of you to do this now. Could you please in the chat write your objectives for this session? And if I don't cover it today, I'll be sure to do it in future sessions, right? I'd like to know why you connected, why you signed up. And so go ahead and write it in the chat, and I'll keep going and read them afterwards, all right? Now, the overall theme for these sessions is using the laws of the LOMLOE to balance out diversity in our classes. What is diversity? Well, it can mean many things to many people. It can refer to diversity of culture, of mental, physical, and emotional abilities, of time in the classroom, and many other factors. The truth is that the minute one student walks into your classroom, you have diversity. You and that student see the world differently. You learn differently, you process information differently, and have different physical and emotional needs. So we'll address all of this, and you're going to feel really powerful, I hope, in how you're going to make important changes in your classes with very little effort. So for this session, I want to give you an overview, a context of the changes that are proposed by the LOMLOE. So if you can just have faith for a moment, I believe that if you have this background, the changes in the LOMLOE will give you this context and help you feel a little more in control and hopefully more in favor of what the laws are proposing for you, what the Consejería de Educación is asking you to do. So take a deep breath and believe just for a moment, please. So the objectives today, first we're going to clarify the connection between the OECD and the PISA exams. Then we're going to outline the structure of the PISA exams. We're going to connect the PISA to the creation of the LOMLOE, because really what I want you to understand is the LOMLOE was created because of the results of the PISA exams that were created by the OECD. So there is a real connection here. Then I'm going to share 2 simple thinking frameworks with you that promote the objectives of the PISA exams, and so by default, for the laws, the changes in the LOMLOE. Afterwards, we're going to reflect on the session and review the sessions that are coming, all right? So hopefully you're going to be happy with that. And again, we're going into specifics of the LOMLOE in future sessions. This way, you have an overview and it'll put it into context for you. So we're starting with clarifying the connection between the OECD and the PISA exams. I also just wanted to go over the dates for the rest of the series in the webinar. I made a whole bunch of dates, and then someone told me that Fridays nobody is going to connect, so I have to change them. I do know that the 3rd of February will be the next one, all right? Now, in an ideal world, this session would be very interactive. In my workshops, the participants always talk more than I do. This is a webinar, so it's a little more one-sided, but I still have a challenge for you. At the end of the session, I'd like you to answer this question. If you were to explain to a colleague what the connection is between the OECD, the PISA exams and the LOMLOE? What would you say? Because if you can answer this question, I know I've done my job and I know you've been paying attention. And if you can't, then there's something that I need to fill in. So it's a good feedback and formative assessment for me too. So just as a quick background, for those of you who don't have all the dates of all the changes made by the different political parties since the beginning of the Spanish democracy, the educational changes have changed 8 times. Some of them have never been implemented, but here you have the dates. The most important one, obviously, is the LOMLOE. Many of you experienced a lot of them, maybe some of you all of them, but we're going to focus on the last one. So during this school year, parts of the LOMLOE have already been implemented, mostly at an administrative level. It's going to be more rigorously required in the next school year, 2022 to 23, and that's probably why you signed up for this session. A shortcut to understanding the changes in the LOMLOE is to understand what the PISA exams are about. And to understand the PISA exams, you need to understand the OECD. Now, what in the world does the OECD, an organization focused on business, have to do with my curriculum, with your curriculum, right? It makes a lot more sense than you may first believe. So again, deep breath, faith. Basically, if you understand the OECD, then you'll understand why they created the PISA exams, and then you'll understand why the LOMLOE was created by the Spanish government. Because that's what I'm going to explain as we go on. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Just believe that there's a really logical connection. Now, the OECD stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. What in the world does that have to do with your classroom, you're asking, right? All right. Well, the organization was formed in 1948, 3 years after World War II ended. So now it's considered to be a think tank. Their goal is to share policies that foster prosperity, equality, opportunity, and well-being from all. Well, that sounds really nice and really fuzzy, but again, what does it have to do with your classroom and the changes you're being asked to make? Well, it gets really interesting. The OECD's, their original mission, this is their statement, to reconstruct Europe and revive the continent's economies following the devastation of World War II. Remember, these are the original mission statements. To encourage the countries of Europe to recognize their economic interdependency, and to convince the leaders of Europe that the integration of their nation's economies was in their best interest. So essentially, the OECD was the spark behind the creation of the European Union. Just a little more about the OECD. There are 38 member countries. It's part of the European Commission. They are the most developed and powerful economies in the world. They're all democratic, which is why China is not one of them, and they have free market economies. So again, where is the correlation? Well, what happens is the OECD has a Department of Education, and their members have found that student achievement in math and science are direct and sound indicators of future economic health of that country. In other words, nations or cities with good schools can expect a healthy economy, whereas a nation or city with suffering schools and students who are not being prepared for the world around them have negative consequences to their economic health. So this is it. This is basically the key. The OECD's Department of Education is looking at countries who have economic health, and they're trying to make them a model, find out what they all have in common so that they can help other countries have economic health as well. My opinion, and I could be wrong, but you can also think about this. Why do they care so much? Could be that a country with economic health means that they have fewer people they need to worry about. But the truth is that it really helps everyone. It helps the students who are going out into the world, and it's helping the teachers give them the skills they need to be successful. Right? So this is the key to what the LOMLOE is. So what I want to do is play a 50-second video that's done by the Director of Education of the OECD. You'll see that he's very sincere about this. He stresses that we're living in an interconnected world, and he mentions the abilities our students most need in this complex world. And then you'll have the key to the focus of the PISA exams. So I'm going to play this for you. Remember, it's only about 50 seconds, okay?
We live in an interconnected world.
Kita hidup di dunia yang saling berhubungan.
Nosotros vivimos en un mundo interconectado.
우리는 서로 연결된 사회에 살고 있어요.
Vivimos en un mundo interconectado.
Nous vivons dans un monde interconnecté.
These days, education is no longer just about teaching people something, but about helping them develop a reliable compass and the tools to navigate with confidence through a world that is increasingly complex, increasingly volatile, increasingly uncertain. Success in education is about identity. It's about agency. It's about purpose. It's about building curiosity, opening minds. It's about compassion, opening hearts. And it's about courage, mobilizing our cognitive, social, and emotional resources to take action.
So if you can wrap your mind around this, the PISA exams were created by an organization devoted to economics because they wanted to identify those countries who have healthy economics and so help other countries do the same. They found this happens when students are strong in specifically math and sciences, but also that they have the ability to meet real-life changes in what they keep calling an internet-connected world. So the conclusion is, the results of the PISA exams in Spain have informed the Spanish government that significant changes need to be made in the national curriculum so that the students here have a better chance to have success in the global market. The end result is that Spain will have a healthier economy in the future because it will be led by stronger global citizens. Now, it's not because students in Spain are less intelligent than anywhere else in the world. It's really simply because the PISA exams focus on competences, 21st century competences, and the national curriculum here is based on content. So that's the switch we need to make. So again, just as a summary of the OECD, they launched the PISA exams in 1997 with the aim of monitoring the extent to which students near the end of compulsory schooling have acquired knowledge and skills essential for full participation in the society. The driving development of the PISA exams have been the capacity of students to analyze, reason, and communicate effectively as they pose, solve, and interpret problems in a variety of subject matter areas. Now, think, is that what you're doing in your classes, and is that what the teachers in your school are doing? The PISA exams are meant to assess students' curricular and cross-curricular competences, but their own motivation to learn, their beliefs about themselves, and their learning strategies. And you'll see that students are given a questionnaire to really find out if that's what's happening. The PISA assessments compare students' knowledge and skills in the area of reading, mathematics, science, and problem solving with the understanding that student success in life depends on a much wider range of competences. Right? So this is a real overview. And what I'd like to do now is explain the PISA exams themselves, because we hear about them all the time as educators, and if we understood them a little more, maybe we would feel a little more relaxed about what's changing and how they're affecting our classrooms, okay? So, the age of the students taking them, they're 15 years and 3 months to 16 years and 2 months, because internationally, that's the last year that students have to, or obliged, have the compulsory education. It's regardless of grade achievement or socioeconomic status. There are students in 65 different countries. The first PISA exams were given worldwide in the year 2000 and every 3 years after that, except for last year, 2021, because of the pandemic, but in theory, they're going to be given this year. Why were they created? Because the OECD wanted indicators of whether schools are preparing students for global knowledge in the 21st century economy. Okay, a little more. The exam itself, each student takes a 2-hour computer-based test. Part of the test is multiple choice, and part involves fuller answers. There are 6.5 hours of assessment material, but each student is not tested on all the parts. After this 2-hour cognitive test, they're also given a questionnaire on their background, on their learning habits, on motivation, about their family's beliefs, and about the beliefs in the school and their teachers themselves. Very interesting questionnaire, and I'm going to show you a few examples of the questions there. I'm also giving you the links so you can go and look in a lot more about this yourselves. So I just wanted you to see, again, these are the specifics of the skills behind the mathematics and the PISA exams. These are not just knowledge. This is what the PISA exams are meant to show what students can do with the knowledge. So the OECD doesn't want the schools to focus on simply knowledge. They want the schools to go the next step, the most necessary step in this world, which is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? How are you going to be a better global citizen? How are you going to help us create a more empathetic and so countries with stronger ties that are able to trust each other? So you see here in the mathematics performance, it's the ability to predict and describe and explain phenomena. It's the ability to recognize the role mathematics plays in the world to make well-founded judgments and decisions needed by constructive, engaged, and reflective citizens. And this word reflective comes up many times. So reflection is very important in the PISA exams. The science performance, this is very common. The first part, the use of scientific knowledge to identify questions, acquire new knowledge, explain scientific phenomenon, and draw evidence-based conclusions about science-related issues. That's what probably everyone is doing. This is what the OECD, through the PISA exams, and the LOMLOE wants us to change. Personal, which are contexts related to students and families' daily lives. Local and national, which are contexts related to the community in which the students live. Global, which are the contexts defined by life across the world. Again, the OECD first focused on Europe, but now is focusing on global competences and skills. The reading performance, they're also, math and science are the biggest achievements, indicators in a healthy economy, but also obviously reading too. So on the PISA exam, we have reading. The capacity to understand, use, and reflect on written texts in order to achieve goals, develop knowledge and potential, and participate in society. It's much more involved in this, but you can see it does add participate in society. So now I just want to show you some examples of exams in Spain, the final exams, and then I'm going to compare them to the PISA exams. So you tell me which you think you have in your school and how you think it can be changed. This is a final exam in math in 4th of ESO. It doesn't matter if you understand it or not. What you can see mostly are numbers, and especially these are the solutions, virtually all numbers. It's all knowledge, and the OECD absolutely understands that knowledge is important, but there's no processing of that knowledge. And what the LOMLOE is asking us to do, and we're going to go through all the laws in different sessions, is help students develop the skills to process knowledge. In the PISA exams, you have invoices, you have graphs, you have employee slips, you have messages. And it's fascinating because what these are doing, for instance, all of the exams have 5 different levels. And the students they don't know that there are 5 different levels. There are different questions. And they can either answer the first 2 and then they don't know how to answer the other 3, or they try to answer all 5. It doesn't matter. But just so you understand, in level 1 for this math exam, they need to recognize the purpose of the invoice and the relevance of different numeric figures. Fine, pretty straightforward. By level 2, they need to apply that knowledge to determine financial decisions. How often do you think the math teachers in your school do this? And the 3rd level, they need to analyze information in a financial context. In level 4, they need to apply understanding of less common financial concepts to contexts that will be relevant to them as they move towards adulthood. So you see, these are very grounded in real life. And it's also pushing students to think about not just their lives right now, but their future. And on the 5th level, they need to apply understanding of a wide range of financial terms and concepts that are understated or not immediately evident. They need to analyze non-routine financial problems, showing an understanding of the wider financial landscape. So you can see this is about processing knowledge. Let's go to science. This is a pretty normal geology exam. You'll see that it's mostly multiple choice. Actually, it's all multiple choice. They have the same answers. They just need to pick out the one they think is appropriate. Again, there's no processing of knowledge. It's just factually based. This is another final exam, simply identifying different parts of cells. And you see in the answers, it's all straightforward. It's all facts. It has nothing to do with their personal lives, neither at a personal, national, or global level. So, on the other hand, in the PISA exams, they get a text. And this is all computer-based, you remember. They get a text, and what they have to do is, first, they interpret data presented in the graph and summarize the overall findings. Student must apply scientific content knowledge to explain the connection between biofuels, the atmospheric levels of O2, and how that might affect the direct community. So this is taking the information out of the classroom. Students must analyze data to determine whether it would be better for a person to use petroleum over ethanol for cost reasons, but also what environmental impact it has over the other. All right, so it's asking them to interpret information. So now let's go to a reading exam. You all are very familiar with this. You get a text. You need to answer questions. Some of them are content-based. Many of them are grammatically based. It doesn't ask them to do any personal reference. It doesn't ask them to take this text and compare it to another one. You'll see, I'm sure you're all familiar with this again. The answers have to do with the text itself, what they see directly in front of them. The answers are either correct or incorrect, and it doesn't ask them to process, and there's no sort of range of whether an answer is accepted or not. On the PISA exam, on the other hand, they get a text. And remember, this is computer-based, so we see the whole text here, but they will only see a part of it. They also have multiple texts they're going to be reading, and they can't see them all at the same time, so they need to remember a lot of the information. They need to compare information in multiple texts. They need to demonstrate ability to detect and handle conflict, which is part of the information in this text. They need to retrieve and compare information in various texts and apply information over a broad context involving personal and global benefits. And they need to integrate and generate inferences across multiple texts and conferences. So they can go back and forth, but they can't see all of it at once, and they do need to make a lot of connections. So those are all, sorry, I don't want to go ahead before I just say this again. You've seen what Spain is doing now in many schools, maybe not yours, maybe yes, but you're also seeing what PISA is asking. And the difference is not just what students know, but what they can do with what they know, all right? So in these questionnaires, this is really fascinating, and I really encourage you to go in and look at the whole questionnaire. They ask these questions such as, how easy do you think it would be for you to perform the following tasks on your own? It says, do you learn the following in school? Something about interconnectedness, conflicts, different cultures. Do you read different sources? Really fascinating. And the students say yes or no. It's not as if there's a pass or fail here. The OECD, through the PISA exams, wants to know. And these are global competences. Explain why some countries suffer from global climate change and why others don't. This one we've seen already. And the school system, learn about the histories of diverse cultural groups. Does your school offer exchange programs, etc.? So they want an overall view of what's happening in the schools aside from just the score in the PISA exams. So we're back to this. If you understand the motives behind the OECD, whether they're altruistic or not, they created the PISA exams so that they could find a model of countries who have healthy economies. And then they found that those countries have very strong math and science achievement in their students. So what they're trying to do now, they created the PISA exams to evaluate other countries and see how they're doing. In Spain, it doesn't look like we're doing so well. So the LOMLOE was created by the Spanish government, by the Department of Education, so that the teachers, we can be more aware that our students might have high achievement in content, but really don't know what to do with that knowledge in the world. So we're living in the fourth industrial revolution, people, and technology can do most of what humans used to be able to do before technology, just the factual knowledge. We need to make sure our students can go beyond that, can go beyond what technology do, and that is exactly what the LOMLOE is helping us create lessons for. So again, it's not just what students know, but what they can do with that knowledge. If you can just remember that, that is the whole basis of the changes of the LOMLOE. And it's also a change from content to competences. So what I want to do now is just share some simple ways that you can begin implementing so that you can already begin pushing your students into processing information. So I'm going to go through this a little quickly. I'm going to give you an example for reading in preschool, science in primary, and math in secondary. In preschool, I'm not going to play this story. I'll give you the link to it. It's this really wonderful story about Pete the cat who has white shoes, but as he's walking through the street, he steps in blueberries and they turn blue. He steps in raspberries and they turn red. He steps in mud and they turn brown. But instead of getting upset, instead of crying, he sings and he just enjoys the new color of his shoes. So it's about growth mentality, and you can explore different issues here. So here are things that we can use this question continuum to do. For instance, a lower order thinking question, this one is just the easiest one, yes or no. Is Pete a cat? They answer yes or no, which also establishes a base knowledge. We're talking about 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. If we go up the question continuum, we can say which shoes did Pete love best? Now, even though this is a lower order thinking question, it's actually kind of involved because we don't really know which ones he loved best, and what students have to do is understand that there's a concept of no one correct answer, very important, and they need to start respecting their classmates' opinions and answers. All right, when does Pete begin singing? I'm sorry, there's a mistake here. When does Pete begin singing? Well, he starts singing every time his shoes change color. That's a growth mentality. That's very positive. So the children can connect unexpected events to our choice in how we react. Either we get angry or we just accept it. And we're developing the growth mindset. Where can you find different color shoes? Well, they might say in my closet, my parents' closet. But then you can, we can go on we can find shoes in stores. We can find shoes in stores in other countries. So we're processing knowledge and we're thinking outside of our environment. What about what? What would you do if your best friend's clothes were ripped or stained or lost? Now, I could very easily have written this question as, what would you do if your clothes were ripped or stained or lost? But we want our students to develop empathy and to think about other people. So they're considering the well-being of others, and they're remembering that we live in an interconnected world and we can influence others positively or negatively, right? So what about how? How is Pete like you or someone in your family? This again is making connection between the world and people around them and learning to take responsibility for their choice and actions. All right, so I didn't go to what if in there. I'm wondering why I didn't do that, but you can. You can see how wide and how the conversations you can have with your students that really will push them developmentally appropriately. We don't have to just stay in the lower order thinking questions. So let's go to science, and we'll take the stages of a river. Are there 3 stages of a river? It's the lowest form of thinking questions. They definitely need to know this. It's yes or no. Yes, by the way. And they're establishing a base of knowledge and of academic language, because a stage in theater means something very different than a stage of river in science. So we need to make sure the students know that difference. To us, it's very obvious. We're familiar with it, but we need to remember that they may not. All right, what about which? Which course of a river upper, middle, or lower is connected to a larger body of water. Now, usually we'll think of the lower stage of the river. It's the mouth of the river going out to a sea or the ocean, but there are other places where rivers are connected. So again, sorting through categories of knowledge and recognizing different perspectives and environments is another way of saying recognizing different answers. Who would most be affected by a drought or a dry bed? Choose two rivers from different hemispheres as the basis of your answer. So again, we're working with academic language here, and we're also respectfully considering answers given by all, and considering the implications of climate changes to people dependent on specific rivers. So we don't want to just pick rivers that the students know very well, but have them research other rivers. What about when? When would be living near a river be an advantage, or when would it be a disadvantage? Include economic and social considerations in your answers. So this would be appreciating the connection between the environment and an individual and a society's well-being, and using interdisciplinary phenomena to evaluate advantages. Interdisciplinary is another very important piece foundation. What would be the reason for diverting a river? Include the community, labor force, environmental impact, and health in your answers. And those of you living in Valencia, you'll know that we did do that, and it was complicated, but really well worth it. Applying facts to social and environmental concerns. Why? Why would using rivers to mark borders between countries be a sound idea? Would it depend on the characteristic of the river? So again, we're using academic language here. I don't want you to avoid using academic language, because then they're never going to use it. They're never going to understand it. So use it and explain it to them. So we're embedding sophisticated vocabulary and questions to augment long-term language assimilation. A sound idea is one with a very strong basis. Sound is, it's not going to be immediately obvious to them. Explain it and they know it. We want to encourage students to consider subjects on a larger scale, citing facts in order to justify answers. And then, yes, I went a little crazy here. What if? What if an immigrant community needed to relocate? What would be the most sustainable area be the upper, middle, or lower course of a river? Okay, but I went further. What would be the most advantageous way of harmoniously incorporating this community into the existing community? Include the characteristics of the immigrants in your answer. All right. Yes, it's involved, but it's awfully interesting, isn't it? Comparing and conflicting elements of societies and studying the characteristics of a specific group of people and exploring their best interests. All right. Oh, and considering the needs of creating a harmonious, heterogeneous community. It's very important in the OECD and so in the PEACE exams. And last, we're going to do math. We're going to go from lower to higher. In algebra, are numbers often replaced by variables? Establishing a foundation of fact. Students need to understand the concept of a variable to be able to answer yes or no, academic language. Who invented algebra, why, and how did it affect sailors? But it affected all the maps in the world. So it was interdisciplinary connections, multicultural referencing, and reminding students of the interconnected world, past and present. When would we be more likely to use algebra? When cooking or participating in sports. Include a domestic and international sport in your answer. So we're processing knowledge of algebra and then analyzing that knowledge in the context of cooking and playing different sports. So again, the real life situation and multicultural references. What benefits could algebra have in your future? We want students to think about why they need this knowledge, what they're going to do with it. Becoming responsible for one's own trajectory, becoming financially independent and managing one's life responsibly. Interdisciplinary considerations. And how would a lack of knowledge of algebra impact your qualifications in participating in a youth initiative on creating a webpage, Living Without Plastic? So again, this is what they're dealing with, web pages and environmental concerns, global interconnectedness, interdisciplinary knowledge, awareness of skill sets and their applications. If they didn't learn this, would they still be okay? Maybe they would, but we want them to think about it. So those are the questions that I'm proposing with the question continuum. There is just so much you can do with it. And I encourage you to try. I have so many. If you want some more examples, I'll be happy to send them to you. The other thinking frame is this. I've used it in many, many schools. Really, it's just asking students before, during, and after they start a lesson, a unit, a project. It gets them to reflect. And what the OECD is asking us to do through the PISA exams and the Spanish government through the LOMLOE is to ask our students to reflect on their own learning. All right? So now, what I'd love to do is find out if you can answer this question. If you were to explain to a colleague what the connection is between the OECD, the PISA exams, and the LOMLOE, what would you say? So I'm going to ask a few people, and if you don't want to, just say, I need to think a little bit, all right? Here's a whole slide on the resources that I'll be uploading into the Google Drive folder. And I just wanted to thank you so much for connecting, being interested in this. And I really look forward to seeing you in session 2. We're going to go deeper into the LOMLOE now that you have a really strong background, okay? So good luck, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful month before I see you again. And just have fun in your classes. See you soon. Bye.